Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 22nd part of What If Deku Can't Stop Adopting Kids. Hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 115, Fuku's Outing Part 1. Please go camping with me tomorrow. Now, when Kyoko went to her room late at night after some lessons from Izuku, she did not expect to find Fuku outside her door, giving her a very sudden request. Fuku was shaking slightly after giving her request, looking away from her, but Kyoko couldn't see her face because of the hoodie she was wearing. Kyoko didn't respond immediately, mostly because of the shock that came from this sudden and strange request coming out of nowhere. Why, you don't have to if you don't want to, Fuku added in a small voice, and Kyoko could already hear dejection in her voice, like she accepted Kyoko's rejection before Kyoko even rejected her. Kyoko didn't even really consider rejecting her. Camping sounded like it could be enjoyable, and since it was Fuku, she knew they weren't actually going to go that far away from the house. And more importantly, it would let her get to know Fuku better. Which was something she really wanted. For multiple reasons. Of course, there was the obvious reason, Fuku being one of her sisters, and thus she really should be on more familiar terms with her. And the other reason was that the first step in getting more familiar with people would be getting familiar with the people that live in your house. Okay. Kyoko answered. Did you ask Daddy for permission? I didn't really think you'd say yes, so I didn't do that yet. But I'll go do that now. Fuku said, before running off. I'll text you the details. Thank you for saying yes. And just like that, she was gone. Kyoko could only wonder what kind of plans were brewing in that girl's head. But she was too tired to think about that right now, so she put that matter aside and went into her room to go to sleep. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX When Kyoko woke up, she found that Fuku had texted her, telling her to meet her in the backyard at the edge of the forest, and to be ready for camping. As well as being reassured that Fuku packed everything they'd need for camping and that she quadruple-checked, to make sure she didn't miss anything. And when Kyoko got there, she saw Fuku, standing in front of a Beowulf, that had all sorts of bags strapped to it. "Why you came?" Fuku's face lit up when she saw Kyoko approach. I was worried that maybe you changed your mind." Kyoko shook her head. "No, I wouldn't do that to you, Fuku." "Oh. I'm not saying you're the kind of person to do that, it's just, never mind." Fuku shook her head. "We should get going. The place I want to go to is pretty far away." "Really?" Kyoko asked, her eyes widening a bit. "It's not too far, I swear." Fuku told her frantically, worried she'd said something wrong. "I mean, it's pretty far, but we're still gonna be in our forest. It's just a part of the forest that's a lot farther away from the house." "It's fine, I just thought you'd want to stay somewhere closer to the house," Kyoko explained, giving her a confused look. "Why do you want to go so far away in the first place?" Fuku paused, and Kyoko could see the gears turning in her head as she thought hard about something. "I'm sorry, but I really want my reason to be a surprise." Fuku's expression then turned crestfallen. "But, if you really want to know, I'll tell you." Kyoko sighed. She wanted to press for details, but she could see that doing so significantly worsened Fuku's mood. "It's fine, you don't have to tell me. I'm sure you have a good reason for wanting to go so far away." "I do. I swear." Fuku promised. Just, please wait until tonight. Then you'll see." "All right." Kyoko agreed, already wondering what Fuku had in store. She looked up at the Beowulf. It was a rather large one, and it was absolutely covered from head to toe in different bags. She heard Fuku was a hard worker, and that must apply to her planning as well. Kyoko only hoped she could have as much fun as Fuku wanted. "All right. Let's get on the Beowulf and start going," Fuku said, hopping into the creature, sitting down on one of the two saddles that was put on it. Kyoko followed suit and climbed up to the Beowulf, although she struggled to try and climb onto the creature due to being significantly shorter. "Oh." Here, let me help," Fuku said, offering her hands, which Kyoko quickly took. With a bit of effort, the two girls managed to pull Kyoko onto the Beowulf, and Kyoko got onto the saddle. "I'm sorry, I didn't think of that," Fuku apologized. "I should have dash. Please stop apologizing," Kyoko cut her off, with a bit of frustration in her voice. "Not everything is your fault." "I know, I'm still trying to learn that," Fuku admitted dejectedly, looking back towards the front and away from Kyoko. Instantly Kyoko regretted sounding so harsh, while also silently cursing Fuku's father for making her like this. Fuku stopped herself before she said, "I'm sorry again. I'll try to stop apologizing so much. I know it can be kind of annoying." No, it's okay. I get why you do it, it's not your fault, Daddy does this too," Kyoko pointed out, to try and make her feel a bit better. She didn't know how effective it was, and Fuku didn't respond. Instead, she just kept looking ahead. Meanwhile, the Beowulf, knowing the girls were on its back, rose, and started running, taking them to their destination. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. They had been riding on the Beowulf for about half an hour in silence, and by now the earlier awkward tension had worn off and been replaced with something else. Sheer boredom. "Alright, Fuku, you made things a bit awkward by apologizing too much, but now it's time to start the fun," Fuku told herself. Hey, I have an idea for a game we can play," Fuku told Kyoko, before opening up a nearby satchel and taking out two cameras. "We can take pictures of everything around us, and see who gets the better one." Kyoko looked a bit skeptical, as she took the other camera. "Okay, how do we tell which one's better?" You just kind of know," Fuku answered, sounding more than a bit unsure. Kyoko shrugged. "It beat just doing nothing." The pink-haired girl started looking around, searching for something to take a photo of. Fortunately, the Beowulf they were riding on, while pretty fast, was not the fastest grim around, and it was also being weighed down by all the bags, so they could still get a pretty good look at their surroundings as they passed by them. Soon, Kyoko found her shot. It was a small pond, surrounded by trees, with two frogs sitting at the edge of it. Kyoko aimed her camera at the scene. Snap! Meanwhile, Fuku looked on the other side, and after a minute of looking, she found a shot of her own. It was of two deer, eating something on the ground next to a tree. Snap! Once the two had taken their pictures, they turned to each other and started comparing. "Wow, that's a great picture, Kyoko," Fuku gasped when she saw Kyoko's picture. It was far from a perfect picture, it was a bit blurry and out of focus, but that was expected for a child. "I think your pictures are a bit better," Kyoko said, taking a close look at Fuku's picture. Fuku's hands were more steady and her eyes more focused, and as such the quality of the picture was quite a bit better. "It's not as blurry." "Well, that's, Fuku looked at both pictures. Her picture was objective of higher quality, but she liked what Kyoko chose to take a picture of more. I think maybe the blur brings it down a bit. Is it okay to say my picture's better?" Kyoko nodded. "Yeah, I'll try to make mine less blurry next time." Once again, the two girls started looking around for something to take a photo of. Or rather, Fuku kept looking at Kyoko. Eventually, Kyoko found her next shot. In the distance, there was a red crane, standing in a small lake, with the sun shining down on it, causing the water to sparkle. Kyoko held her camera, and Fuku paid close attention to how she took the photo. Snap! The moment Kyoko took the picture, Fuku tapped on the Beowulf's head, signaling it to stop. "Ha?" Kyoko looked around in confusion. "Why did we stop?" Can I take a look at that picture?" Fuku asked, receiving a nod from a still confused Kyoko. Fuku took the camera and inspected the picture she took. It was even worse than the last one. The blur was even worse, and because the picture was taken so far away and she didn't zoom in on it, you could barely make out the crane. "You're moving too fast," Fuku told her. You have to take your time to get everything just right. Here, hold it up. Kyoko followed her instruction and held the camera up to her face, and Fuku moved her arms to center the shot. Here, since it's so far away, you should press the zoom button right here. Fuku guided her, as Kyoko used the zoom feature and focused in on Crane. Now try to be as steady as possible, Fuku told her. Just breathe and focus. Kyoko nodded and tried to do as instructed, breathing in out and focusing intensely on the shot. Snap. Alright, let's see how it turned out, Fuku told her, as they both took a look at the picture. It was significantly better. A lot less blurry, and they could actually see what she was trying to take a picture of. There we go. That's much better. Fuku praised her, giving her a bright, excited smile. Kyoko, meanwhile, was shocked at how much the quality had improved, with just a short lesson and a few tips. Wow. You're really good at this, Fuku. Ha! Fuku blushed intensely at the sudden compliment. And no, I'm just a beginning too. You should see some of the pictures people take online. They're much, much better than mine. It's just that I've gotten used to taking pictures of stuff. Because I like to draw and paint stuff, so sometimes I need to take pictures so I can paint it later. I see. Kyoko thought about that. Maybe she should get into photography as well. It was strangely satisfying getting a good shot, and she did like painting as well. With her mission complete, Fuku tapped on Beowulf's head, and they started moving again. Alright, let's keep going with the game, Fuku said, picking up her camera. Okay. Kyoko said, sounding a bit more determined, and a bit more into it than she was before. Wanting to put these lessons to use. Once again, the two girls started looking around, trying to find the next thing to take a picture of. Oh! Fuku gasped, as she saw a small hair coming out of its hole. She quickly pulled up her camera, lined up the shot very swiftly, and took a picture. Snap! Meanwhile, Kyoko found a bird sitting in her nest, with her babies. Kyoko did what Fuku told her, she raised her camera to her face, and took a bit of time to center the shot, zoomed in correctly, and... Snap! The two quickly turned to each other, and immediately started comparing pictures. Oh, that one's so cute. Fuku praised the moment she Kyoko's picture. So yours. Kyoko said, looking at the hair in Fuku's picture. I think yours is a bit better, Fuku said. It has 3 baby birds. Sue. I win? Kyoko asked her. Fuku nodded enthusiastically. Good job. Kyoko smiled, feeling a sense of pride. She looked at her picture and she just felt good. She'd done a good, for her age, job at capturing a really cute scene on camera. You know, this is more fun than I thought, Kyoko admitted, before holding up her camera and giving Fuku a smile. Let's keep going. And Fuku's heart soared. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. And so the two continued to take pictures for the next hour of their journey. However, the game ended when they finally arrived at the campsite. We're here, Fuku said excitedly, as the two looked around at the campsite Fuku chose. It was next to a big lake and under the shade of a massive nearby tree. All in all, a very nice campsite, but Kyoko still wasn't sure why they had to go this far away to go camping. Daddy knows we're out here, right? Kyoko asked, a bit concerned about how far they were, now that she realized just how much time had passed. Fuku nodded. Of course. And there are a ton of Grimm around to protect us. And there's even a seer over there. She pointed up at one of the trees and saw a seer latched onto it. Okay, just wanted to be sure. Kyoko said, her hesitation falling away. So, what do you want to do? Well, first we should probably unpack and get everything set up, Fuku said, looking at all the bags she brought. I really did bring a lot of stuff, didn't I? You don't have to help if you don't want to. No, I'll help. Kyoko insisted. Are you sure? It's gonna be a lot of work. Fuku added, but Kyoku just nodded. Oh, okay. Let's get started. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After about 20 minutes, the two finally finished setting up camp. The most notable thing was the big tent, which was at the center of their camp. On the outside, it looked like a normal gray tent, but on the inside, it was actually see-through. This was something Fuku had asked for specifically from Izuku. The next most notable thing was the small table and two folding chairs. With a cooler next to it, as well as a crate with some snacks in it, but not much food, Kyoku had noted. There was also a small grill close to the table, and some seasonings and other things used for cooking. Lastly, there were also some chests, filled with various things that Fuku had packed. So what do we do now? Kyoku asked. Maybe it'd be good to go for a swim? Fuku suggested. I brought swimsuits, but can you swim? Kyoku shook her head. Can you? Yeah. I was worried that if I was being chased that I might need to swim away if I got to a lake or something. Fuku admitted. Do you want me to teach you? Kyoku nodded. Yes, please. Okay, well then let's get changed. Fuku looked up at the seer. Please look away. We're going to get changed. The seer turned away, allowing the girls some privacy. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After a quick change into their bathing suits, they began to enter the water. It's cold. Kyoku noted, as the two slowly walk into the water. She was wearing a pink polka-dotted white swimsuit, with a frilly skirt on the bottom. Yeah, but you get used to it. Fuku reassured her. She was wearing a plain purple swimsuit and was guiding Kyoku into the water by holding her hands. Now whatever you do, stay calm. Freaking out is really, really bad. So just remember, I'm here. You know, you're a lot cooler today than you normally are. Kyoku told her, giving her an appreciative look. Once again, Fuku's face exploded into a blush. WWW, what are you talking about? Me. Cool. That's, oh look, we're getting deeper into the water. Let's start focusing on teaching you how to swim. True to her word, they were approaching a depth where Kyoku could no longer walk and would have to start actually swimming. Fuku could still walk around though, due to her being taller. Alright, now let's practice floating first, Fuku said, regaining her composure, while she recalled the way her instructors taught her. First, just lie back and stay calm. A person's body floats on its own, so all you need to do is let the water lift you up. Kyoku let Fuku position her backward until she was lying back in the water, with Fuku's hands holding her up, and she felt a little nervous. Okay, I'm going to let you go now. Are you gonna be okay? Can you stay calm? Fuku asked her, also feeling a bit nervous. Kyoku took a deep breath and summoned her courage. I'll be okay. All right. And with that, Fuku slowly let go of Kyoku's body. The moment she did, Kyoku feared she would sink. The feeling of not having anything physically underneath her to hold her up was a bit frightening, and she had to command herself not to move. Not to ask Fuku to hold her again. She had to hold on tight to her courage. And it paid off, as a few moments later, she noticed she wasn't sinking. The water was pushing her up, rather than dragging her down. It was still a bit scary to have nothing solid underneath her, but for the most part, she could breathe a sigh of relief. All right. You're doing it. Now just keep doing this for a few minutes, so you can get used to it. Fuku explained. Then we can move on to the next thing. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The next 2 hours were spent teaching Kyoku how to swim. Fuku instructed her patiently, and Kyoku appreciated how thorough she was. It helped her understand things easily, and whenever she did something wrong, Fuku was quick to correct her. It was thanks to this that after an additional hour of practice, Kyoku was able to swim, kind of. She still wasn't very good at it, moving very slowly and inefficiently in a way that would quickly exhaust her, but she could move through the water without sinking, and that was major progress. But after all those hours of learning, Kyoko was pretty tired, so Fuku carried her on her back, as she swam back to shore. "You really are amazing, Fuku." Kyoko praised her sister, as she clung tightly to her back. Fuku stopped suddenly, and her face turned red again. "I mean, not really. I'm sure Izuku could have taught you a lot better than I could have. He's a lot smarter than I am." Kyoko nodded. "But Daddy's a lot older than you. You're only 2 years older than me. And you know so much more than me. And you're a really good teacher." For a while after that statement, there was silence. Until Kyoko heard something start hitting the water. She looked down and saw teardrops that had fallen from Fuku's face, falling into the water, creating small ripples as they landed. "Fuku?" Kyoko picked her head up and looked down at Fuku with eyes full of worry. She heard sniffles coming from her, and a very, very quiet sobbing noise. Meanwhile, Fuku was trying to hold it together, trying to stop the tears flowing out of her eyes. "I'm sorry. It's just, sometimes, it still feels like a dream. Or like I'm inside an ice sky. The months I've spent here sometimes don't feel real. I'm worried I'm going to wake up one day, and everything will go back to normal. I won't have Eri, or Kei, or you. No one will tell me I'm amazing. No one will tell me I'm useful. I'll go back to being Fukunoko. Child of misfortune." Kyoko's embrace grew tighter. Her previously exhausted body suddenly felt hot with rage. "That's never going to happen. That terrible man can never, ever hurt you again. Never. Our nightmares are over. We've suffered enough already." Fuku paused for a minute, before responding. "I hope you're right. If this was a dream, I don't think I could bear ever waking up from it." Chapter 116, Fuku's Outing Part 2. After getting out of the lake, and drying themselves, they decided to try a more relaxing activity. That being painting. Fuku set up some stands and some canvases, and put some seats in front of them, and the two sat down and got ready to paint. "So what do you want to paint first?" Kyoko asked. "Well, I was thinking we could make paintings out of those photos we took," Fuku said, grabbing the cameras the two of them had used to take the photos. Kyoko nodded. "Sounds good." Fuku handed over one of the cameras, and the two got to work. Painting quietly by the lakeside. Kyoko found the experience quite pleasant. It was so quiet. She loved her new home and family, but sometimes she wished it wasn't so constantly noisy. Like all the time. Right here, the only noise came from the wind, and the sound of their brushes, and this allowed Kyoko to fully focus on her painting. Currently, she was working on recreating her picture of a crane in a lake. And she thought it came out pretty well. A mostly blue painting, with a single white thing that somewhat resembled a crane. Okay, it wasn't all that great, but Kyoko understood that people her age weren't about to create the next masterpiece. Doing something well came with practice, and Kyoko was only 6. And Kyoko was confident in that notion until she looked over at Fuku's painting. Now, Fuku's painting wasn't a masterpiece, but it was leagues better than Fuku's. Fuku had chosen to recreate her picture of a rabbit coming out of its hole. It had perspective and detail, and the rabbit looked 100% like a rabbit. "How are you so good at this?" Kyoko asked in shock. "Gee, good?" "Well, I wouldn't say I'm dash." Before Fuku finished her sentence, she looked at Kyoko's painting, and quickly decided to stop that sentence right there. "Well, I had lots of practice. Pretty much all I did was read, paint, draw, write and cook. And I stopped cooking a whole lot once. He locked me in my room, so I started painting and drawing more. So I'm sure if you practice you'll make paintings even better than this one. Actually, here, let me show you something. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. And that's how you draw with perspective," Fuku explained. Fuku brought out a new canvas and showed her how to paint a lake properly, without just making the whole canvas blue. "Now you can paint some trees, and you can make the crane look like it's coming out of the water," Fuku said. "Watch." Kyoko watched Fuku intensely, as she started painting. It was a very slow process, as Fuku hesitated before every stroke, looking over the painting each time she did anything as if constantly judging herself, trying to discern the best course of action to properly paint the picture. Her hand was absurdly steady, something Kyoko had taken notice of, but now could fully appreciate. There were no twitches, no involuntary movements, no awkward lines. Fuku painted trees and the sun before finally painting the crane. "There, now if you really want to improve it you can add some details," Fuku said. "You'd be really surprised how much some lines can make a picture feel more alive." She was not wrong. Fuku added some very carefully painted lines, and it made the whole painting much better. "So, did you understand what I was doing?" Fuku asked her. I think I do." Kyoko understood what Fuku told her, but she wasn't sure if she could actually put it into practice. "Can you help me practice?" "Of course." Fuku nodded, putting her painting aside, and setting up a fresh canvas. "Let's just try to get this crane panting right. Just remember what I did and try to do it again. If you start messing up, I'll help guide your hand. Just try to focus." Kyoko nodded, and she picked up her brush. She took a deep breath and started painting. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. "And you're done," Fuku said, putting her hands together and looking happily at the picture. Kyoko looked over her work inquisitively. Overall, it was a vast improvement on her original painting, by basically just being a worse version of Fuku's painting. Although given how good Fuku's painting was in her mind, making a worse version of it was still something she was amazed by, and for the most part she'd done it herself. Fuku had helped her out, of course, guiding her hand for a few seconds here and there, putting her on the right track, but this was still 70% her own doing. "So do you want to try doing one on your own now?" Fuku asked her. Kyoko nodded, eager to see how well she'd manage on her own. "Alright, well let's just see how you do," Fuku said encouragingly. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After painting for about an hour, they decided to move on to something else. Archery. Twang. Darn. Kyoko pouted as she saw her arrow fly past the target and fall to the ground a few feet away. Fuku had set up a target, very close to Kyoko so her tiny arms could muster enough force to actually hit the target, and taught her the basics of how to use the bow. However, Kyoko wasn't having much luck in actually hitting the target at all. Her arrows flew to the sides, stopped before they could hit the target, and even sometimes went backward. She'd been able to graze the side of it once, but never did she actually hit it on her own. The only arrows that hit the target were the ones that Fuku had helped her with. But for some reason, she couldn't hit it, and she was beginning to get really frustrated. Fuku, seeing her frustration, began to get nervous that she may have made a mistake in her planning. Well, maybe you should imagine the target as something else. Something you hate. Like your parents. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have meant dash. Twang. 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 Thunk. 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 Fuku was cut off by Kyoko, rapidly letting off arrows, and shooting them at the target in rapid succession. About half the arrows missed, but the other half impacted the target, most of them landing around the inner circle, but one of them hit the edge of the center. Kyoko smirked, before looking over to Fuku. "Can I have more arrows please?" Needless to say, Kyoko's accuracy improved dramatically for the rest of their practice session. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Putting the bait on both hooks. Now, we just have to throw the line in. Kyoko nodded and watched as Fuku sat down in one of the folding chairs she brought and grabbed her fishing rod. She was learning a lot today. And while none of these things is anything she had wanted to learn, she was appreciative nonetheless. Alright, just do what I do, Fuku instructed her. Raise your pole, back over your head. Fuku raised her pole, back over her head, with Kyoko doing the same. And then just throw it over. But keep your grip tight, so you don't throw the rod. Fuku continued. Like this. Fuku threw the rod over her head, and the hook flew into the water. See? Kyoko nodded. She tightened her grip around her rod, as hard as she could, before throwing it, tossing the hook into the water. Good job. Fuku praised her, giving her an encouraging smile. There was a light in Fuku's eyes that Kyoko hadn't seen before. A sense of joy Kyoko couldn't quite place the source of, but was appreciative of it nonetheless. Now we just wait. And so they did. They just sat there, with nothing but silence between them for a little while, before Fuku worked up the courage to speak. So, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what happened back when you went outside with Yami and Yanda? Why were you so upset when you came back? Kyoko frowned and looked away from her, not responding for a while, as she considered what to even say. Part of her, a very significant part, wanted to refuse. To tell Fuku she didn't want to answer. But another part of her remembered that she needed to open up to other people if she wanted to get better. And maybe, just maybe she learned something else from Fuku. They wanted to know why I don't like people very much. Kyoko answered. And the reason was, because I'm angry, and I'm jealous. I'm angry and jealous because of how everyone else is with their parents. And even though I have a new daddy now, one that loves me, I still feel these things and I feel ugly. She heard Fuku finish. Kyoko's eyes widened, and she turned back to Fuku and looked at her in shock, only to find a very, very sad expression on her face. You feel ugly and ungrateful, and like you should be happy, and because you're not, that there's something wrong with you. Fuku continued, her tone was cold, and that light in her eyes had vanished completely, replaced with a dull sadness that left Kyoko agape. How did you know? Kyoko asked, her voice so quiet it was pretty much a whisper. Because I feel like that too, Fuku responded, her voice still cold, and she looked to be staring at her reflection in the pond. Back when I was still with him, I'd read books about people with loving families, best friends, or lovers. And I'd feel great at first. I'd put myself in their place, and I'd just imagine I was them. And I'd feel amazing. Until I heard my father call me. Then I'd remember who I really was. That I had no friends. Or loving family. And I felt angry and jealous. At least for a little bit, before all the fear washed it away. Kyoko was just looking at her in shock, because was, while not exactly the same, eerily similar to her own experience. And she'd never expected someone as timid and gentle as Fuku to feel anger and jealousy like she did. She seemed too nice for it. And now, I still feel like I'm not anything like the characters in my books, or manga, or anime. Fuku continued. Even though I have nice people who care for me, I finally have a loving family, some things are just wrong. I can't call Izuku my father. Even he's basically the father I've always wanted, I still can't call him that because when I think of the word father, or dad, or anything like that, I still think of him. The way she said him, her tone suddenly shifted to become bitter and angry in a way that Kyoko never thought she'd hear from her. He's still here, not in person, but part of him is still with me. Still trying to hurt me. Fuku's voice was trembling with rage and sadness, and tears were beginning to form in the corners of her eyes. I can still hear him sometimes, judging me. Insulting me. Sometimes I can even feel him hitting me, I don't even know how that's possible, but it is. He can't touch me anymore, but everything he did still happened, it made me into this. He made me not able to call someone father, he made always afraid that someone's trying to hurt me, he made it so I can't love myself. And thanks to those candies, I know exactly what he took from me, and I hate him. I just hate him, so much. And Fuku was cut off, as suddenly Kyoko launched herself at her, enveloping her in a tight embrace before she started sobbing into her shirt. Kyoko. What's wrong? Fuku quickly put aside her own feelings and looked down at Kyoko with great concern. Did I do something? Or say something? What's dash? I am. Kyoko struggled to speak over her tears and sniffles. It sounded like she was choking on her own words. I'm not alone, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Kyoko didn't sound sad. She sounded happy. Overjoyed. Those words hit Fuku and hit her hard. I'm not alone. She was crying because she finally found someone who understood her. Who felt similar to how she felt. She was crying because she wasn't an outlier. And now Fuku was crying for the same reason, tears slowly falling out of her eyes. We're not alone. We are not alone. In a house full of trauma, Fuku always felt like she handled it the worst. Eri and Kei, despite going through things that were even worse than what she went through, seemed fine for the most part. Way better than her. Oftentimes she'd lament being unable to let go of the past like Eri and Kei seemed to be able to. She felt like she was being pathetic, no one else was like this, so why was she this way? But hearing that someone else shared her feelings was liberating. And so she dropped her fishing rod and held Kyoko tightly, and the two embraced for a while. Fuku didn't know how long the embrace lasted, maybe minutes, maybe hours. She just lost track of time. They only separated when they heard a quite concerning sound. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr source of the noise. I'm hungry, Kyoko admitted, blushing with embarrassment at something like this interrupting such an important moment. Oh, aha. Fuku's eyes widened, and her face went white. I was planning to cook up the fish that we caught. Kyoko's eyes also widened, as she realized that because of what happened, neither of them had caught any fish. Oh. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After getting Kyoko some of the snacks she'd brought along, using those to hold them over, the two continued fishing. I got one, Kyoko shouted as she started reeling it in as fast as she could, pulling the small fish out of the water, and into the air where it flopped around, struggling on the hook before Kyoko grabbed it. More food. Great job, Kyoko. Fuku praised her before she got a tug on her own line. Oh. I'm getting one too. Fuku started reeling it back, and with some effort, she pulled the fish out of the water, and into the air. Whoa! It's as big as my arm, Kyoko said, looking at the fish in awe, as Fuku put it in her bucket. The two had been at it for quite some time now, pulling in fish and placing them in two separate buckets. It wasn't a competition, given that Fuku had more experience, it was more so that way Kyoko could look at her bucket, and say that SHE was the one who caught those fish. It was to make her feel proud. And it worked too. Sometimes Fuku would see her stare back at her bucket and smile. And that made Fuku smile along with her. But in between hooking in fish, they would talk. So, do you hate people who haven't had bad things happen to them, sometimes? Kyoko asked her, as she threw her line back in. I used to, just a little bit, Fuku answered. But it always felt wrong to do that. It's not like they ever did anything bad to Fuku, so Fuku shouldn't want bad things to happen to them. So whenever I used to feel like that, I'd just think about my books and manga. Kyoko looked up at her in awe, as if she just said something revolutionary, before going into thought. Can you give me some manga so I can do that? I really want to stop being so angry at people. Of course. Oh, I know this one about a fox girl that will absolutely melt your heart, Fuku told her. Her face lit up with excitement as she began to rattle off titles she'd used to comfort herself over the years. They stopped their talk momentarily, to reel in more fish, before moving on to another topic. How do you move on so quickly? Kyoko asked next. You weren't able to go out of your room at first, and now, you can do all this? But me. I haven't moved on much. Well. I wouldn't say I moved on, Fuku admitted with a pout. I'm still really scared of doing new things. Honestly, I was scared you'd reject me when I asked you to go camping. It's hard. Really hard, to force myself to do all this. But I need to do it. When I ate that candy, I finally knew what it felt like to not hate myself. And I want that. I want it more than anything in the whole wide world. I always have, even before I ate that candy, but now I want it even more. So I need to work really hard to stop being afraid and do what I need to do to feel that way again. Fuku looked down at Kyoku, who looked up at her with eyes that sparkled with amazement. And Fuku felt her heart fill. It was now that Fuku started to really feel that Kyoku was her younger sister. Eri, Kei, and Kiba always felt like they were her older sisters. Even though she was older than them. Because in Fuku's mind, an older sister was one that guided and taught their siblings. One that helped them through difficult times, and through experiences they'd already been through. And while Fuku had done her fair share of that with Eri and Kiba. But those were outliers. For the most part, those girls had guided Fuku through her recovery. They helped her move forward when otherwise she'd be paralyzed with fear. But or rather, thought the entire day, Fuku had been guiding her. Showing her how to do new things and giving her advice on how to push forward. It felt overwhelmingly amazing. A bit scary, she was concerned she might say something wrong, but she literally just said she had to push past things like that, so she did. When you have to do something really scary to get what you want, just think about how badly you want it, Fuku advised, before flashing her a bright grin. And don't be afraid to rely on others for help. Honestly, I don't know how far I could have gone if Eri and Kei weren't there to help me. If you feel like something's too much for you, you can call Eri, Kei, Izuku, or me, if you want. Kyoko smiled back at her and nodded. Fuku was truly glad she decided to go on this trip. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Sis. M. Kyoko looked like she was in heaven at the moment, with a plate of fish in front of her and some of the food already in her mouth. It's so good. Fuku was working on a grill nearby, cooking up the fish they caught. Are you sure? I didn't overcook it or put on too much seasoning? Kyoko shook her head. No. I love it. I'm glad, Fuku said, giving her a relieved smile. I haven't cooked much on a grill, so I was worried I might not do it right. You worry too much, Fuku. Kyoko reassured her, shaking her head before stuffing her face with more food. You're really talented. I think you know more stuff than anything at home, except Daddy. I doubt that. Fuku quickly denied it. Besides, there's no way I'm anywhere near as amazing as Kei, or Eri, or Kiba. Those guys are just on another level. Kyoko didn't quite agree with that notion but wasn't really able to find a way to argue against it, so she just kept quiet and kept stuffing her face, and soon she forgot about it altogether, because the fish was that good. As Fuku was finishing up her own plate of food, she noticed the sky was beginning to change color. Oh. Kyoko. Quickly come here. Kyoko looked up from her food and saw Fuku walking towards the edge of the lake. Curious, Kyoko got up and followed her, bringing her plate with her. The two sat down at the edge of the lake, with their plates set down on their legs. And soon Kyoko saw why. Wow. This was not Kyoko's first sunset, however, it was her first time seeing the sunset, over a lake, in a forest. Seeing the sun slowly go down behind the mountains, as the sight reflected in the crystal clear waters of the lake, was one of the most beautiful things Kyoko had ever seen. Kyoko couldn't even finish her sentence, as soon her mind just focused on taking in the sight in front of her. Fuku herself was overwhelmed with joy, both that the sight was as awe-inspiring as promised, and that she wouldn't disappoint Kyoko. The two just stared at the sunset for a while, until the sun finally went down. And when the sun went down, the stars came out. Kyoko gasped when she saw them. She'd obviously seen stars before, but never as clearly as now. Thanks to living so close to the city. But now she could see what the sky looked like without all the light pollution, and witness them as they were meant to be, and the reflection of the lake made it all the more beautiful. How are there so many? Kyoko managed to ask. Nara said something about all the lights in the city making it harder to see the stars. So if you go far enough away, you can see them like this. Fuku explained. It's really amazing, right? Kyoko just nodded, her eyes glued to the sight in front of her. Eventually, the two managed to continue eating, but their heads still remained tilted upwards, as they stared at all the different stars in the sky. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Wrapped up into their sleeping bags, they continued to look up at the night sky. "Did you have fun today, Kyoku?" Fuku asked her hopefully. To anyone else, the answer to that question would be obvious. But Fuku just had to make sure, in order to shake her fears completely. Much to her relief, Kyoku nodded her head. "Today was amazing. I learned so much, I ate great food, and I got to see so many amazing things. And it was all thanks to you." Fuku felt like her heart was going to burst from joy after hearing that. Her face went red and she felt a smile form on her face. "Thank you. I tried really hard to plan everything out." Kyoko looked over to Fuku and gave her a joyful smile. "Can we go out again sometime? And can we bring Eri and Kei?" "Of course. That sounds wonderful." Fuku quickly agreed. "Everyone's been through so much. And I know we're gonna have to go through some hard things in the future too. So I want to make as many good memories as possible. I'm hoping that if we make enough good memories, it'll make the bad ones hurt less. What do you think?" "I think that sounds amazing. Big sis." Kyoku responded. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. "Well, it looks like they hit it off," Fu commented, as the two of them looked at them through the seer. "I know, and I couldn't be happier about it," Izuku said, sitting in bed, ready to go to sleep. Suddenly, Izuku's phone started vibrating on his nightstand, and Izuku leaned over to see who it was. Oh. It was Nami. Well, I knew this was gonna happen eventually. Izuku sighed as he picked up and answered the phone. "Hello Nami, it's been a while." "Hey, Midoriya. It really hasn't it?" Nami responded. "So I just woke up from a meeting, I just got out of a meeting, and speaking of things it's been a while since, guess what, it's time for you to meet your new highly dangerous bundle of joy. I guess it's been long enough." Izuku readied himself to accept a new face to the house. "Alright, tell me about them." Chapter 117, Baby-Faced. Izuku was very nervous about this next child. And it wasn't because she had a dangerous quirk. They all had dangerous quirks. And this one wasn't even uncontrollable. To give more details, this child was named AKA. And her quirk was called Assimilation. Assimilation was a mutant-type quirk that turned AKA's entire body into a kind of metallic clay-like substance. Her body could change shape to a minor degree, not full-on shape-shifting like Sanson. She could also regenerate if her body had enough nutrients. But the main ability of assimilation was its ability to allow AKA to take over another person's body and mind. All she had to do was insert any part of her body into a person's bloodstream through a cut of some kind. It could be a small piece of herself that she could rip off, or her entire body if the cut was big enough. Then this would allow AKA to take over that person's body and mind, giving her full access to their abilities, and depending on how big of a piece of her in that person, she can even access their quirk factor and start to mutate it, causing changes in a person's body and quirk. She could take over as many people as she wanted, adding them to a sort of hive mind. It was a very dangerous quirk, but one that was also controllable. Normally, she'd just be under government watch, without them feeling the need to take her away into the DOC program, unless she proved to be dangerous. Which she did. Because her mindset was almost as dangerous as her quirk. AKA had lived in a small town near the mountains that had been utterly destroyed by villains, leaving very survivors. None of which were AKA's parents, leaving the poor girl alone and devastated. And this had a terrible scar on her mind. This was seen when she was taken to an orphanage, which was unfortunately run by a less than suitable director, who was rather abusive towards the children. Thanks to the villain attack, aka now had an unyielding hatred towards villains and anyone who acted like a villain. And so, while most people would despise a man who abused children, AKA's hatred was on another level, shown by when she convinced some of the other children to cut the director with a knife, allowing her to use her quirk to take over his body. She then proceeded to torture him for several days, forcing him to harm himself before giving control of the body back to him temporarily, so he could feel the pain. This torture lasted for a week, before AKA decided it was enough, forced him to gather up evidence of wrongdoing, and made him turn himself in. Naturally, the authorities realized something wasn't quite right, and quickly discovered that AKA was controlling him, and after extracting the piece of her from his body, he immediately told her what AKA had done. Once that was revealed, AKA was deemed too dangerous to be part of normal society at the moment and thus was taken into Dios's care. When confronted about her actions, AKA insisted she was in the right, saying that the only reason she didn't torture him for longer was that she was concerned he would die. So at the very least, she drew a line at that point. Although she stated that she didn't particularly care if the man lived or died, rather she didn't want to be labeled as a killer. It was clear the incident had traumatized her quite severely, and it was going to be hard to convince her that perhaps villains didn't need to be tortured, or treated like they weren't human. Especially since that mindset wasn't necessarily popular. Izuku sighed as he looked down at one of the other documents he had to sign. It was a related document to accept a shipment of what was called Vegeta formula, Vegeta being short for vegetables. This formula had one purpose: releasing a person from AKA's control. Because normally, trying to release someone from AKA's control would be almost impossible in a fight. The only way to do so, other than this formula, would be to remove or destroy the piece of AKA that was in their body. However, a way around that was by exploiting AKA's main weakness: vegetables. She was deadly allergic to vegetables, to the point where eating them could actually be fatal to her. As such, if a person under AKA's control were to consume a vegetable, it could kill the piece of AKA that was inside them, thus freeing them of AKA's control. This formula was made to streamline the process. Just throw a bomb filled with this formula at someone AKA was controlling, it'll explode into a gas, and once they breathe it in, that person will quickly be freed of AKA's control. Of course, this gas was very dangerous to AKA and would need to be kept away from her main body. The only reason Izuku felt comfortable accepting this gas was because of the potential danger AKA possessed by living here. Izuku didn't like looking at children as potential villains, but he couldn't turn a blind eye to the possibility of AKA taking control of the other children here, and that would be disastrous. I hope I never have to use this. Izuku shook his head as he signed the paper. Hopefully, everything just works out until I can get them into therapy. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Izuku waited outside of the house, with Achiko beside him. I'm sure she'll be fine. She hates villains, and there are no villains here. Achiko reassured him. Not yet. Remember knees. Izuku pointed out. Achiko's eyes widened. Oh God, I forgot about her. Oh, that's gonna, I am sure you'll figure something out. I hope so, Izuku said, as he saw a car drive through the entrance gates and up to the house. The car stopped, and the back door opened. At long last. I am free. He heard a young feminine voice say. For some reason, the voice sounded like something you'd hear come out of a villain on an old dubbed anime, or like a Power Rangers villain. And then he saw her. Despite being 9 years old, the girl was about as short as Kyoku. Her entire body was metallic silver, looking like a mixture of liquid metal and clay. Her eyes were pure blue, with no pupils or anything, just blue. She wore a mostly yellow and blue dress, with some red stripes thrown in, as well as a hairband with similar colors, wrapped around the top of her head, which was shaped into a weird tail/ponytail thing that drooped down from her head to her back. Yes, excellent, AKA said as she exited the car, with a sinister grin on her face. From here, I'll become the most powerful hero in history. Ahahahaha. Never in their lives did either Izuku or Achiko think that they'd hear someone proclaim they wanted to be a hero, in a cartoonish villain monologue. This place just gets weird and weirder, huh? Achiko thought to herself. Well, I hope we can provide everything you'll need to achieve that goal, Izuku said as he walked over to the small girl, and gave her a friendly smile. AKA looked up at him with an inquisitive glare, putting her finger under her chin as she sized him up. So you are the caretaker of this facility, yes? You're younger than I expected. Well, no matter. I'm sure you heard about the last caretaker that dared to commit evil acts in front of me. Izuku nodded. Yes, I did. And I'm glad you brought him to justice. I'm not particularly happy about the torture, but after all you've been through, I don't feel the need to hold that against you. So let's put that behind us. AKA kept looking at Izuku for any sign of evil, but after not finding any she moved on. Very good. Well then show me around my new fortress. She and Kiba are either going to get along wonderfully, or horribly. I'm scared of what'll happen if it's the latter. Izuku thought to himself, as he took AKA inside. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Well first, let me show you your room, Izuku said, as he opened the door, and showed her room. AKA looked over the room. It had been prepared for her the day before. The bed was made, a computer and TV had been set up, and the room was dusted and cleaned. She jumped onto the bed and looked around a little more. Yes, this place is fine for the time being. Obviously, once I become a hero I'll purchase myself a whole mansion, but for now, this will do. I'm glad you think so. Izuku told her gently. Speaking of becoming a hero, from your files, I've read you've had some trouble training, because your body doesn't exactly gain muscle or grow very much, and you can't exactly test your quirk on people. AKA scowled. True. The price for having an amazing quirk is that it's rather hard to train with. Well, in response to this, I have thought of several ways for you to train, Izuku said, pulling out a piece of paper and showing it to her. For one, you could practice some gymnastics and martial arts. This will help you when you don't have anyone under your control to fight for you. Speaking of which, I've also had the idea of giving you some bladed weapon training. Since you have to actually make a cut into your opponent in order to take them over. AKA put on a thoughtful pout, as she considered Izuku's words. Part of me dislikes having to do things myself, but I will do what I must to make sure villains are punished. Good. One of the most important parts of being a hero is to understand what you can and can't do, especially on your own. Izuku warned her. This place is home to children with powerful quirks like yourself. There are even a few who want to be heroes, and they would easily be able to make a cut in an opponent. Wonderful, they sound like good allies. He. Once again the girl let out an evil laugh. Together with the power of friendship, we will crush the villains in mind, body, and spirit. Ahahaha. I've never heard anyone talk about the power of friendship so sinisterly. Izuku thought to himself. Speaking of those kids, I do need you to remind you that while they are powerful, they are also dangerous, which is why they're here. Don't do anything that may cause them to freak out or panic, or it could end in complete disaster, for you and everyone else. I know that, AKA stated confidently as she crossed her arms over her chest and closed her eyes cockily. Trust me, I am very smart. I'm sure nothing bad'll happen because of me. I hope so. Also, just to let you know, there is a very tall boy about 6 feet to be exact, looks like he's covered in moss, don't touch him or you may burst into flames. Izuku warned her. AKA's eyes opened quickly, after hearing what Izuku just said. Oh, and there's another girl here who constantly reads the minds of the people around her, she can't stop so please don't get upset about her. Izuku continued. AKA repeated, her eyes getting wider. One more thing, there is a girl you may see, she has lavender hair, and wears a hoodie, she gets scared very easily, and if she gets too frightened she'll let off a gas that makes you experience a living nightmare that's so awful it's put people in states to where they'll need to have therapy for the rest of their lives. aka repeated once again, this time much louder as her eyes achieved max wideness. But don't worry. She's gotten a lot better control of it since she first got here. Izuku tried to reassure her before something else came to mind. Sorry, one more thing I promise. You're going to see monsters around here that look like they're made of darkness. That's normal, they're made via the quirk of another child here. Don't worry, they won't hurt you. Oh, okay. AKA was stunned by all this, so Izuku decided to let her learn everything else at her own pace. Well, that's most of the important information. There's a list of rules on a board on this floor. If you need anything, feel free to ask me, or one of the temporary workers here. They're only going to be here for a short time, but while they're here you're free to ask them to help, within reason of course. I will do that. AKA responded, still a little shocked. Right, well. I'll let you get comfortable here, Uraraka should have your bags up soon, so just wait a little bit. Izuku told her kindly, as he got ready to leave. Remember, if you need anything, or anything's wrong, just call me, and I'll take care of it. Izuku opened the door to leave and found Yonda standing on the other side, with a tray of cookies in her hands. Hello, father. Yonda greeted him cheerily with a big smile on her face, before looking past him at AKA. And hello to you, AKA. My name is Yonda, it's a pleasure to meet you. Ah. Why is there a voice in my head? AKA panicked for a moment, before remembering what Izuku had told her. Wait. The caretaker told me about a psychic girl. This must be her. Wait, is she reading my mind right now? Yes. I do apologize for the scare, but this is the only way I can speak. Yonda told her as she came into the room. I am also deaf, so any attempts to speak to me in a normal way will unfortunately fail. Oh. Well, greetings. I am AKA. The future bane of all villains. AKA introduced herself after getting her bearings. For now, I'll be staying here until my rise to power. Don't worry, if anyone attempts any villainy here, they will regret what they've done very much. Ah. Did she just do an evil laugh in her head? Yonda thought to herself while keeping up her friendly smile. I'm sure. Anyway, I've brought some cookies, free of vegetables or vegetable ingredients of course. Fuku made these. She's another one of the girls that live here. She's a lovely girl but very shy. She wanted to make you these to welcome you here, but she didn't have the courage to come and give you them herself, so I'm here instead. The moment Yonda said vegetable free, she sped over to her and greedily looked over the tray. Don't mind if I do. She then grabbed the whole tray and shoved it in her mouth, which extended to fit the massive object, and once it was halfway in, she let all the cookies fall into her mouth, before spitting the tray back out. Ah. Those were delicious. Did you even have time to taste those? Yonda asked her skeptically. I'm tasting them right now. AKA told her. Okay then. I'm just not going to try and understand how your body works. Yonda told her. Anyway, let's talk for a while. I'd love to get to know you better. Yonda, you're not planning anything, are you? Izuku asked her, giving her a questioning look. Of course not, father. I just want to get to know our new friend and welcome her to our wonderful home. Yonda said innocently, in a very cheeky tone. Well, I don't really have any reason to suspect you'd do something wrong here. Please don't prove me wrong. Izuku told her, as he started to leave. Well, I'll let you two get acquainted, please behave. Both of you. Yes, father. Yonda said, waving Izuku goodbye as he exited the room before she turned her head to AKA. Now then, let's have a talk. Chapter 118, Short. Alright Fuku, just gotta make that pudding and then you can go back to your room, Fuku told herself as she snuck into the kitchen late at night. Alright, first let's get a bowl. She went over to a cabinet and opened it up. Only to see AKA hiding inside, wearing a gas mask. Found you at last. AKA said. Aha. Fuku jumped back and screamed, and gas exploded out of her. Ah ha 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 ha. How fortunate I choose to wear this mask. Truly, I am a genius. AKA cackled, as she stepped out of the cabinet. Who are you? What do you want with me? Please don't kill me. Fuku quickly realized she'd made a mistake. She jumped away at an angle that made her go further into the kitchen, and away from the exit, and now AKA was blocking her path. I am AKA, the new resident of this house, AKA announced, walking closer to Fuku, who backed away as she advanced. You were the one who made me those cookies, weren't you? Fukanoko? Did you think I would allow you to escape after that? Did you really think I wouldn't find you? Oh no. She must have hated the cookies and come to take out her rage on me. Fuku trembled as she backed further and further away from AKA, but the other girl just kept coming forward. Please. Spare me. Fuku begged, tears glimmering in her eyes. As she kept moving back, however, she stopped once she reached a wall. There was nowhere to go. I spare no one. Ah ha 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 ha. AKA once again evilly cackled as she raised her arms and lunged at Fuku. Nu aha? Fuku suddenly stopped screaming when AKA threw her hands around her and gave her a hug and a pat on the back. Those cookies were delicious, thank you, AKA told her, before separating from her and turning around. Now with that done, I am going to go to sleep, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop me. Good night. And with that, she just left. Fuku just stood there for a while, unsure of what just happened, before eventually coming to a conclusion. I think I'll make that pudding tomorrow night, Fuku told herself. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. AKA was chilling out in her room, which was now properly decorated with things. There were various posters of superheroes from American comic books, covering almost every inch of the walls, and those comic books themselves were all over the floor, stacked atop each other. The girl herself was laying down on her bed, reading one of her comic books, when suddenly there was a knock on her door. Ugh! Who dares disturb me? AKA groaned, putting down her comic, and going over to the door. She opened it, and on the other side was Fu. Before Fu could say anything, AKA started yelling. You! State your name and business here. Why have you disturbed my relaxation time? Ah, I see we have another color personality here. Fu sighed, before introducing himself. My name is Fu. And this Kyosei. Kyosei popped a head out of Fu's shirt, causing AKA to look on in shock. He lives inside me. Don't worry about it. Fu said as Kyosei went back into his body. They must have a quirk similar to my own. Interesting. AKA said, putting her hand on her chin. Anyway, so we heard you want to be a hero, Fu stated. Well, you heard correctly. AKA confirmed, giving him a sinister smile. I plan on becoming a powerful hero, and tormenting all evildoers that would do evil. All villains will fear the name AKA. Ah ha 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 ha. Oh, Kiba's gonna love her. Fu thought as he rolled his eyes. Well, me and the other future heroes wanted to see what you're made of. So we gathered up in the training room, you coming? Nah, don't feel like it, AKA said, seemingly dismissing him, only to burst out laughing a few seconds later. As if. Of course, I'll come. I need to see who my allies in villain crushing will be. Well then follow me, Fu told her, before turning around and walking away. Just so you know, I think you guys will get along just fine. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Fu led her outside, just outside of Kai's room, where Kai, Kiba, Ken, Nara, Sanson, Netsu, and Yami were waiting. Hello, new friend. Kai greeted her once she came into view, his voice bellowing throughout the forest. Why is he so big? AKA thought to herself when she saw him. Hey there. Welcome to the Future Heroes Club. Netsu said, running over to greet her. I'm Netsu. AKA opened her mouth, but Fu spoke before she could say anything. Yes, he knows he is on fire. That's normal. Fu told her. Okay then, I am aka Future Bane of all villains. Aka announced. One day I will become a hero, and bring pain and suffering to all criminals. Ah ha 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 ha. Yeah. I can definitely tell your heroic intentions from your evil laugh. Ken sarcastically remarked as he raised an eyebrow at AKA's statement. Hey! My laugh is not evil. AKA gasped, offended by Ken's observation. It kinda is. Ken retorted. It's the most generic evil laugh I've heard come out of a real person. No, it's not. AKA argued back, glaring at Ken while crossing her arms. A laugh by itself can't be evil. A laugh can only be evil if you're laughing at something bad. Like if you laugh at a funeral, that's an evil laugh. I mean, she's not wrong. Fu shrugged. It's pretty evil to laugh at a funeral. I want people to laugh at my funeral, Netsu replied, causing everyone to look at him in confusion. Why? Why on earth would you want that? AKA asked with the most bemused look on her face. Well, otherwise it'd just be a bunch of sad people in a room. Netsu pointed out casually. I don't want my funeral to be a bunch of sad people in a room. But that's just what a funeral is? Fu tried to explain to him. I don't want my funeral to be a bunch of sad people in a room, Kai said, pouting with all three of his heads. Yeah, me neither. I want my funeral to be a party. Netsu decided. Who would be in the mood to party after you die? Kiba asked him. If you have a party, then people will just try to force themselves to have fun, and bottle up their emotions until they explode. Boom! Sansan made herself explode into a puddle, to illustrate Kiba's point. Wait! Guys, we got off topic. Fu told them. Remember, we're supposed to test how strong AKA is, not talk about whether or not funerals are supposed to be fun. Well said, Fu. Let's get to what we came here for. Kiba said, before cracking her fingers and then her neck. So then, new girl, what's your quirk? My quirk is called assimilation. I can rip off pieces of myself, and put them inside cuts in people's bodies, and then take them over. AKA explained proudly. Wait, doesn't that mean you can't do anything until you cut your opponent? Ken pointed out, immediately seeing a problem here. Well, why yes, AKA admitted, blushing a bit. But once that happens, the villains will be completely helpless. But until that happens, you're completely helpless, Ken remarked harshly before Nara elbowed him. Ow. What? I'm being honest? What he meant to say was, does your quirk have an ability to help you actually cut villains? Nara asked her. Or at least help you survive against them? Well, I can regenerate, my body is really squishy and hard to injure, and I don't feel pain as much. AKA stated sheepishly. So, nothing that can actually help you make a cut in someone? Kiba asked her, giving her a skeptical look. No. AKA began looking downward, avoiding everyone's gazes and sweating nervously. I see. Fu looked at her and thought for a while. She reminds me of me back before I bonded with Kyosei. Fu noted. Well, I guess her quirk could be way more useful than mine, in the right circumstance. Alright guys, looks like we're going to have to do things a bit differently, Fu told them. Since her quirk is not as self-sufficient as most of ours, she might work better in a team fight. So here's what we're gonna do. Kiba and AKA will fight against Ken and Nara. Ha! Why do I have to be teamed up with him, her? Ken and Nara said at the same time, before glaring at each other. Can you two stop pretending to hate each other for a few minutes and just do it? Fu sighed. It looks like we'll be working together. I am the great and mighty Kiba, my strength will pull us through. Kiba told AKA confidently. Well, my quirk will ensure our victory and their doom. AKA retorted. Make sure to use my abilities well. Ah ha 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 ha. Alright, all of you will be given some time to prepare and strategize, Fu told them. Then we'll meet in the forest and start fighting. Got it? Good. Let's get started. XXXXXXXXXXXX. After about 10 minutes, everyone had gathered in a large opening in the forest. Kiba and AKA stood on one side, and Ken and Nara stood on the other side, with all the other kids sitting a good distance away from them, and Kai looking down on them all. Alright, everyone ready? Fu asked them. 1 second. Nara said, before looking at Ken. Better not mess this up, doofus. That's what I should be saying, Ken replied, as they both selected a form on their Omnitrix. They both slammed down on their devices, and in a flash of green and pink, the two had transformed. Ken had turned into Stinkfly and Nara had turned into blocks. Oh, this might be a problem. AKA realized. I don't suppose you can take over that Lego ape, can you? Kiba whispered to her. Unless it has a bloodstream, no, AKA told her. So then we just need to focus on Ken, Kiba told her. Try to keep Nara distracted. Alright, let's get this over with, Fu announced, as he stepped back. 3.2.1. Go! Immediately Ken tried to take to the sky while shooting goo at Kiba to try and keep her away. Kiba had, at the same time, rushed towards Ken, and had to roll to the side to avoid the goo, and she continued running towards Ken while narrowly dodging the goo. Ken hadn't made it very far into the air by the time Kiba reached him, and Kiba jumped up and grabbed one of his legs. Hey! Let go! Ken tried to shake her off, but Kiba kept a firm grip on his leg and threw a piece of AKA onto one of his wings, which stuck like glue. Before Kiba could do anything else, Nara turned her arm into a cannon, and shot a part of her Lego-like body at Kiba, knocking the vampiric girl off her brother. Kiba rolled across the ground, before pushing herself upright. Meanwhile, Ken tried to shake off the piece of AKA that had been thrown on him, but it held on tight. It's not coming off. Then get in the air and don't get cut, moron. Nara ordered. Don't boss me around. Ken argued, while also doing exactly what she said, and getting higher up in the air. Alright Kiba, try cutting me now, AK. Kiba then proceeded to start taking chunks out of the ground and throwing them at Ken as fast as she could. Ken of course tried flying around to avoid the projectiles, but that was easier said than done. He had to stay in bounds, meaning his movement options were limited, and Kiba had lots of ground to throw at him. A little help here. Ugh. Can't you do anything on your own? Nara asked him sarcastically, before aiming her arm cannon at Kiba to shoot at her again, only for AKA to stand in her way. Not so fast. Before you fight her you must first face me. As AKA was giving her speech, Nara extended one of her arms and grabbed her. Nara's massive hand encompassed most of her tiny body. Nara's fist then expanded around AKA, before transforming into a Lego brick prison box, trapping the silver girl for the time being. Curses! AKA screamed, although it could barely be heard from inside the box. Once Nara disconnected herself from the box and grew back her hand, she grabbed the box and used it to launch herself over it, right at Kiba. Nara extended her fist down at Kiba, and the vampire girl was forced to jump back to dodge it and halt her assault. Alright, Ken. Gunk her up, so I can trap her. Nara shouted at her brother. However, the response she got was less than pleasing. Agh. Ken. Nara looked up at Ken, who was holding his head in pain. One of the chunks of ground that Kiba had thrown at him successfully made a small cut on his head, and the chunk of AKA crawled down towards it and was now crawling into the wound. Agh. Oh, this feels so wrong. Agh. It didn't take long for Ken to start falling to the ground, crashing into the dirt, before a flash of red overtook him, and Ken had been turned back to normal. Ah ha 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 ha. AKA laughed from inside her box. Your demise is at hand. Now witness my power. Agh. Gah. Ken groaned in pain, while his body suddenly started changing. His hair turned a silverish white. And his eyes turned bright blue. All of a sudden, Ken stopped groaning, and his face morphed into a twisted grin and looked up at Nara with a sinister glare. "Hello, sister." "Yeah, nope." Nara launched her arm at Ken, grabbing him, and morphing her hand into a binding prison that would keep him from moving his arms, and touching the Omnitrix. "Please don't say anything like that with my brother's mouth. In that case, I'll let my fist do the talking." AKA/Ken said, as suddenly, they were engulfed in green, and then were transformed into four arms, who immediately burst out of the bind that Nara had put them in. All four of them. Ah ha 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 ha. She made him change without using the Omnitrix? Nara thought to herself. Come to think of it, she must have made him change back to normal too. Can she alter the way a quirk works when she takes over someone? I must admit this is a wonderful body. With such an interesting quirk. AKA/Ken said as they inspected their body. So many powers. I wonder if I'll be able to use all of them in this fight. Let's find out. AKA/Ken started approaching Nara, causing her to start backing up. However, Kiba suddenly dashed behind her, cutting her off. Now. Don't run away. This is where things get interesting. Kiba smirked at Nara viciously, knowing she'd already won this fight. Of course, with the odds stacked against her, Nara knew that just as well. And did the only logical thing she could do in this case. I give up. Nara said, raising her arms as proof of her surrender. Not much point in fighting a 3 versus 1 battle. What? Kiba and AKA/Ken shouted in shock and slight outrage. And that's it. Kiba and AKA win. Fu quickly stepped in. Congratulations, now AKA please get out of Ken's body. Oh, woo. But I didn't even get to do anything with it. AKA/Ken whined. You wanna fight with it, that's something. Not get out. Fu told her again, very sternly. Poof. Fine. AKA/Ken pouted, and in a flash of red Ken's body returned to its normal form. Then after a few moments, Ken's hair and eye color returned to normal, as the piece of AKA that had been in him, crawled out of the cut on his forehead. Off. Ken's eyes rolled up, and he proceeded to fall on his back. Ow. Nara went over to her brother, while Kiba went over to AKA's prison box to break her out of it. You okay, doofus? Nara asked, slightly concerned about his well-being. Never again. Ken groaned as he regained full control of his body, with the only noticeable side effect being a killer headache. I think I hate Ghost Freak even more now. If that's what it feels like to get possessed. Were you even awake while she was in control of you? Nara asked him, as she offered him a hand, helping him lift himself off the ground. No. I just felt something going through my body, and then everything went black. Then I woke up with this headache. Ugh. Ken groaned, clutching his poor head. Feel like I got hit by a truck. Meanwhile, Fu used one of Kaiosei's tendrils to pick up the piece of AKA that had been inside Ken and bring it to his hand. What an interesting quirk. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. All of them were now gathered, Nara had returned to normal, and AKA had been freed. That was short, Yami said, pointing out the obvious. Yes, it was rather disappointing. I was hoping you'd at least try to fight after Ken was possessed. Kiba said, frowning at the older girl, who gave her a deadpan look. Kiba, I'm not sure I could beat you in a one-on-one fight. Let alone you and my idiot brother. Nara told her. Hey. It's not my fault I got possessed. Do you know how hard it is to get through a fight without getting cut? Ken argued, glaring at his sister. If I could have just used Heat Blast, there's no way I could have gotten taken over. We already told you why you couldn't do that. Fu reminded him. Before the fight had started, Fu had told Ken not to use Heat Blast, as the part of the forest they were in didn't have any lakes around, so the Goliaths couldn't put out any potential forest fires Ken may start in that form. Ken was opposed to this, but Fu was insistent that it's how things had to be unless he wanted to delay the fight for hours so that way they could find another place for them to fight. This was a lie, however. And in truth, Fu realized that both Ken and Nara had ways to make themselves immune to AKA's quirk, and needed an excuse to keep at least one of them from doing that. He did want to see AKA's quirk in action after all. Well, what did everyone think of AKA's quirk? Fu asked. It's pretty cool. All you have to do is make a tiny cut in the enemy and the fight's over. Natsu gushed. Yeah, it'll make fighting villains super duper easy. Kai added, his massive head looking down at AKA with a big smile. I must admit, while her quirk may not make her all too useful on her own, her usefulness as an ally is impressive. Kiba praised her. It's powerful. Yami simply stated. Yeah, I thought that if Ken could stay high in the air, we could avoid letting her use it, but trying not to get cut in a battle with someone around your level of power sounds like a nightmare. Nara sighed, shaking her head. I only realized how powerful your quirk was when I started thinking about how to fight against it. Should have given you more credit. Meanwhile, AKA had a smile on her face that was so big that it would have hurt if her body wasn't so stretchable, and she would have blushed if her body was capable of it. Well, of course, my quirk is amazing. And with the help of all of you, we will crush our enemies beneath our heel and make them do our bidding. Ah ha ha ha. I like the sound of that. Kiba added, patting her on the back. Come, everyone. Let's celebrate the new addition to the heroic part of this household. With a wondrous feast. Yeah. Chapter 119, The Coming of the Guards. You seem like you're in a good mood today, Izuku. Achiko pointed out, as the two of them walked through the house's halls, down to the first floor. Am I? Well, I guess that makes sense. Izuku admitted, with a big smile on his face. Sori was discharged from the hospital, and Sai got all of her things together. Both of them are coming in today. So I finally have some security besides the Grim and you guys. No offense to you guys, of course. None taken. After seeing what Sori did to the Grim, it puts into perspective how much progress we still have to make to get anywhere near that level. Achiko looked down, and suddenly her smile became a bit strained. Izuku's own smile dipped, as he knew exactly what she was feeling. The feeling of inadequacy. He smiled at her. Well, you're going to be far stronger than her one day. So don't worry. You'll get there. That did make Achiko feel better for a moment, and she smiled back at him before she recalled something. Then you're going to become the #1 hero. Because you'll be able to do those things faster, and better than everyone else. Achiko couldn't help but remember Yanda's words when she heard Izuku say that. The way he said she'd get stronger than Sori, it was more like a foregone conclusion. She had one for all, for it wasn't really a question if she could get stronger than her. Because no matter how much Sori worked or trained, she'd never reach the output of one for all. And she couldn't help but feel a bit bad. But she quickly shook her head, ridding herself of those thoughts. Right now was not the time to be thinking about that. She didn't want to ruin Izuku's mood after all. Right, thanks. Achiko smiled back at him. Alright, hopefully when they get here, things will calm down in terms of unwanted violence, Izuku said. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. What on earth happened? Izuku shouted in shock, as he stared at the scene in front of him. Izuku was on the path that headed towards the facility, and in front of him was just a burnt battleground, covered in craters and fire. And in the middle of it all, was Sori standing over Sai with a foot on her throat. The two of them were covered in cuts, burns, and bruises, their clothes torn and dirted. Oh hey, boss. Sori finally noticed Izuku's presence and gave him a big grin. Sori here, reporting for duty. Is that seriously the first thing you're going to say to him after all this? Sai groaned as she attempted to push Sori off of her. And would you please remove your foot from my throat? Izuku facepalmed, as Sori moved off of Sai, and Sai got off the ground and dusted off her suit. Please just, what happened? Oh, funny story. Sori started, getting ready to explain everything. Yes, C dash. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. A little less than an hour ago, Sai was walking down the main path towards the facility, with her bag full of her belongings in hand. She didn't have much. The HPSC made sure of that, but at least that meant she didn't have to deal with moving a bunch of bags around. As she was walking down the dirt road, she stopped, and her eyes narrowed. Something's approaching me. Sai then opened a gate behind her, and a blunt sword flew out of it, just in time as Sori had lunged at her from behind, and was about to grab her, but the sword hit her in the chin and caused her to go fly back. Ow, ow. Shit. Sori said as she rolled backward, landing on her toes. Damn, that hurt. Sai didn't give her time to recover, and Sori became surrounded by portals, from every angle, with the tips of swords jutting out of them threateningly. Oh wow. That's a pretty neat quirk you got there, Sori said, looking around at the swords. Who are you, and what is your business with me? Sai asked her in a harsh and strict tone, delivering an intense glare towards the cat girl. Well, you see, I'm this place's guard. So it's kinda my job to stop suspicious people from just walking up the house. Sori explained casually, not at all fazed by the weapons surrounding her. Wait. You're the other guard Midoriya hired. Sai realized as she recalled Izuku talking about Sori during their meeting. Your name is Sori if I recall. Oh, so you're my partner. Sword girl. Sori said, realizing her mistake. Would you look at that? Damn, I need to stop instantly attacking things in this place. Always end up doing something I shouldn't. You should probably stop instantly attacking people in general, Sai told her, deactivating her quirk. Hey, I didn't say we were done fighting. Sori frowned, getting into a lunging stance. Sai just gave her a bewildered look. What? I want to know just how capable my partner is, Sori explained with a savage grin on her face, her tail moving side to side in anticipation. Also, I've been stuck in the hospital for like a month, and now I finally get the chance to fight someone strong? No way in hell am I letting a chance like this go. Now get ready. Sai took a quick look at Sori and knew she wasn't gonna back down. Fine. But you're taking responsibility for this. Here we go. Sori lunged at Sai, moving at speeds her opponent had no hope of reacting to. Fortunately, she didn't have to. Kaboom! Suddenly a massive explosion erupted from the ground, hitting both of them and knocking them both back. Sai knew she couldn't keep up with Sori's speed. And at the distance the two were at, she'd need to do something drastic, otherwise, she'd lose instantly. So she created a portal underground and shot an explosive sword out of it. Ack! Sori was launched back and sent rolling across the dirt. Meanwhile, Sai was also sent flying back, but since she was prepared for the explosion, she was able to flip back and land on all fours. The former hero didn't give Sori any time to rest and created more portals in front of her. Sori jumped backward, and as the sword shot out of her, she curled into a ball midair, dodging the first set of swords before falling back and landing on her feet, before dashing forward. Sai shot out more swords at her, but Sai jumped over them, leaping into the air before she started hurtling down at Sai. But Sai opened up portals behind and in front of Sori as she was falling, and shot out lots of swords at her from both sides. In response, when the swords got close, Sori spun around and kicked away most of the swords coming at her, and grabbed two of the others. But that was only a distraction, the swords coming directly at her weren't the threat, no. It was the swords around her that were the threat. Because those swords hit each other, and then... kaboom! They detonated, creating a massive explosion that engulfed Sori completely. Ag! Sori was spat out of the black cloud that was created from the explosion, hitting the ground close to Sai, before rolling across it behind her. She quickly used her claws to dig into the dirt, to regain her footing and stop herself from moving much further. However, the moment she stopped, Sai surrounded her with portals, with blades aimed at her from all angles. Ready to give up? Sai asked her sternly. Sori stood up and cracked her neck before giving her a huge grin. Not on your life. I'm just getting warmed up. Very well. Sai acknowledged her resolve. Be ready. And then the swords closed in on Sori. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. And after that things got out of hand. Sai sighed, shaking her head in shame. What are you talking about? That was awesome. Sori argued enthusiastically. I apologize for the mess, sir. Sai gave Izuku a bow. I shouldn't have allowed things to progress this far. It's fine. Izuku shook his head and sighed as he tried to look on the bright side. At least now you know each other's capabilities. That's a plus, I guess. That's it, boss. Just keep looking up. Sori said, walking up to Izuku and patting him on the back. Now let's get going. I want to grab some grub. Sai was about to admonish her for her lack of grace or tact, but she was cut off when her stomach started growling. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr head held low. I would also appreciate it if we could get something to eat. Please. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After a short trip to the facility, they finally reached the front gate of the house. Alright, I already have some food ready for the two of you, Izuku told them, as he opened the gate using his phone. We can just go inside and dash. Before Izuku could finish his sentence, two things happened. First was that Sori jumped backward, third was that Sai grabbed Izuku and pushed him behind her, and third was that Kiba crashed into the ground where Sori had been standing. Nice try, wait. Lady Kiba. Sori gasped when she realized who had been attacking her, and her eyes sparkled with amazement. Indeed. It is I. Kiba. Kiba announced, holding her head up high and putting her hands on her hips. The great and powerful Queen of Eternal Darkness. And you are one of my minions, correct? Of course, Lady Kiba. I've come to serve you and the Midoriya clan as well as I can. Sori shouted enthusiastically. By beating the crap out of any idiots who'd wanna punch ya. Kiba nodded. Good. However, I can't simply ignore that you broke onto the grounds of my fortress, killed several of my monsters, destroyed my property, and scared my siblings and caretaker. Sori winced and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah. Not my brightest moment. And since you are one of my subjects, it falls to me to punish you for your misbehavior. Kiba punched her palm and stared down Sori with a vicious grin on her face. Now prepare yourself for a queen's punishment. However, before the fight could start, Kiba turned to Izuku. I apologize for the scare, caretaker. I hope you don't mind me sparring with our new guard. I don't, but next time, don't come crashing from the sky, Izuku told her, before looking at Sori sternly. And Sori, no using your claws. I don't want my daughter bleeding all over the lawn. Got it, sir? Sori said, giving him a thumbs up. Alright, you two have fun, Izuku told them. And that's when the fight really started. Kiba did a lightning-fast jump kick, launching herself at Sori's face, only for the feline woman to duck backward, and as Kiba sailed over her, Sori grabbed the back of her dress. She quickly stood up and started spinning around, before tossing Kiba into the forest and leaping after her. Is this truly a wise decision? Sai asked, sounding a bit concerned. Honestly, Sori's fight with you is proof enough that she can hold back in a fight. After all, to have a few injuries as you do despite having no enhanced durability has to say something. Izuku said. TCH. Sai looked away in embarrassment. Alright, I'll send one of the UA students to go watch over them. For now, let's get you something to eat, Izuku told her. And then Sai perked up. At once, sir. Chapter 120, Taking Up the Sword. Saibura, the former pro hero turned guard, was currently scarfing down a stupid amount of food on a table in the cafeteria. Right now she was snacking on a rack of ribs, but she also had a beef bowl next to that, some meat skewers next to that, a bowl of rice, and a cooked chicken. As well as a few stacks of plates surrounding her. Dude, where does it all go? Kaminari asked Sato, the two of them being a table away, looking at Sai in shock and awe. I have no idea. Apparently, blonde girls have the ability to eat forever. Sato said as he looked over to Amai, sitting at the same table, eating a similar amount of food together with Yami. I'll have to keep that in mind, Kaminari said, making a mental note of that. While the two were chatting, Momo and Ida came into the cafeteria and walked up to Sai. Please forgive us for interrupting your meal, but we'd like to speak with you about something, Ida told her as they approached. MGRRRRRR. Sai sighed, her annoyance clear to all, even though she had a mouthful of pork. She knew that the one as students would speak to her sooner or later, most likely sooner given they were leaving the day after tomorrow, but did it have to be while she was eating? After swallowing her food, and reining herself in, Sai turned toward the pair and gave them the most neutral expression she could muster. What is it? Well, we were wondering, since you were a pro hero, if you could give us any personal advice or something of that level? Momo asked her polity. Yeah, that was about what Sai anticipated. It was either this or them asking about why she retired, so she's thankful it was the former rather than the latter. I suppose that's a fair thing to ask, Sai responded. Very well, tell everyone to gather in the training room in an hour. Once I'm done eating. Thank you, Ms. Buora. My class will do everything we can to learn from your wisdom. Ida assured her, giving her repeated respectful bows. And I'll everything I can to teach you, even with such limited time, Sai told him, before turning her attention back to her meal. Now if you excuse me. I would like to finish eating. The two didn't even get to respond before Sai started digging in. Why do I have a bad feeling about this? Kaminari asked. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. After some time, all of one gathered in the training room, with Sai standing in front of them, her arms crossed behind her back. Can anyone tell me, what's the most important part of being a hero? Sai asked them. Defeating villains? Todoroki answered. Minimizing casualties? Achuko answered. Not dying? Mineta answered. Correct. All of you. Sai told them. In truth, there is no one answer to that question. In my mind, a hero's first priority should be saving and protecting the innocent at any cost. Even their own lives. However, I can't act like all heroes are willing to do that. Some heroes simply aren't willing to pay that price, others are only heroes for fame and glory, and while I have an issue calling those people heroes, there is little I can do about it, so I must acknowledge those goals as well. But something that should be highly prioritized no matter what your goal is, something that should be a high priority for all of you, is staying alive. Which is what I'm going to try and teach you. I will be fighting you each, one by one, and will tell each one of you what your most fatal flaw is. Any questions? You're not gonna stab us, right? Mineta asked nervously, his face going white at the thought of facing Sai's many blades. That, and so much worse, Sai said ominously. But as they say, no pain, no gain. And I think you'll find being stabbed much preferred to being killed. And if not, I would highly suggest you change careers. Now, any other questions? Almost everyone raised their hands. Sai sighed. I can already tell I'm going to spend my whole day doing this. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX 1A on the side, watching them. Alright, you can begin, Sai told him, giving Aoyama permission to attack. We. Aoyama said, before shooting his naval laser at Sai. Only for Sai to drop a sword that looked to be made of some kind of glass or crystal, in front of her, causing the laser to deflect into the wall. Oh, je vais mourir putain. Aoyama responded, his eyes widened in fear. Then portals opened up around Aoyama, surrounding him. Aoyama looked around, and froze in fear, as he saw the swords begin to emerge. Kaboom! The swords exploded on impact, engulfing Aoyama in a massive blast. Is he gonna be okay? Mina whispered over to Momo, both of them looking nervously at the smoke cloud that hid Aoyama. "I'm sure she wouldn't do anything to harm us unnecessarily," Momo reassured her, although she didn't sound too sure herself. Eventually, the smoke cleared, revealing Aoyama on the ground, covered in burns and soot. "Et portant je viscount malheureusement. Where to begin?" Sai asked herself as she shook her head in disappointment. "A crucial lesson you all must learn is to control your fear. Fear is the #1 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks. After witnessing this match, can anyone tell me why that is?" Sue raised her hand. "Because it shows the enemy their opponent can't beat them, and causes you to freeze?" "That's correct. Fear, more than anything else, will be your biggest hurdle to overcome," Sai told them. "And what if you're not afraid of the villains?" Shoto asked. "Then you're an idiot," Sai answered harshly, glaring at Shoto. "Fear is absolutely necessary for a hero. Because without it, you become overconfident. And overconfidence is the #2 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks. Quirks are varied and dangerous. You could go on to try and arrest a group of teenagers mugging an old lady, and then suddenly one of them shoots lasers out of their eyes, and because you were so confident they wouldn't be a threat, you can't dodge it in time and lose your head. Fear is something you must manage, keep it at a healthy level. To where you have a healthy level of caution, without ever allowing it to overwhelm you. This is, of course, easier said than done, and most comes with experience rather than being taught. Still, sparring matches are a good way to help train your fear management skills and increase your reaction time." Sai looked back at Aoyama, who was pulling himself onto the ground. "Your second biggest issue was your lack of mobility. I could tell by your stance that your plan was to just fire at me without moving. Like a turret. This is a bad strategy against me, especially considering I can attack you from literally anywhere, but in general, that's not a good tactic. There are situations in which not moving while fortifying your position is the best or only way, but most of the time, you at the very least have to be ready to move. I left several openings for you to escape there, but even if you hadn't frozen in fear, you wouldn't have been able to escape the attack in time because you weren't ready to dodge. Just because your quirk doesn't assist with mobility, doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to dodge." At this point, Aoyama's face was red with embarrassment. I understand. I will strive to improve, Madame Biora. I hope so because if you fight villains in your current state, you are going to die, Sai told him bluntly, before looking to the rest of the class. "Let's move on. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX confidence. "You may begin," Sai told her. Instantly, Mina started sliding towards Sai in her acid. Sai made a wall of portals in front of her and shot out a lot of blunt swords at Mina. "I don't think so." Mina let out a wave of acid in front of her and dissolved the swords before they could hit her, allowing her to get through. Surprisingly, Sai didn't send any more swords, allowing Mina to get close. "I've gotcha!" Mina shouted as she got ready to punch Sai in the face. However, when she threw her punch, all she hit was the side of another sword that came out of a portal Sai spawned in front of her. An electrified sword. Garajilsakiawiowij. Mina cried out in pain as the electricity flowed out from the sword and into her body. Her hair flew up, her body convulsed and spazzed, and burn marks started appearing on her skin. After a few seconds, Sai pulled the sword back into the portal, cutting off the flow of electricity to Mina's body. Ow! Mina fell onto her back, smoke coming off of her well-done body. "Can anyone tell me where she went wrong?" Sai asked, turning her attention to the class. "She announced that she was going to attack you like an idiot?" Jiro pointed out. "Hey!" Mina picked herself up and gave Jiro an angry pout. "Correct. If you have to announce your attack like to say your special attack name, then do it while your attack is in the midst of landing, not before you attack, while the villain can still dodge it," Sai explained. Also dash. Sai made a portal above Mina's acid trail and shot out an electrified sword into it, and everyone watched as the trail lit up, lightning sparking off of it. Always be careful when standing in or making a trail of liquid, Sai said, looking at Nina's horrified face. Never know when you could get shocked by a villain with an electricity quirk or just an exposed wire. I'll keep that in mind, Mina told her, chuckling nervously. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Now it was Ajui's time. Sue was in a crouched position, ready to leap at a moment's notice. All right, begin, Sai told her. Sue jumped up into the air and was immediately surrounded by a dozen portals. Kaboom! Exploding swords hit her, and Sue fell out of the cloud, smoking. Ow. Caro. Well, that fast, Kaminari noted. I know you're a frog, but it's dangerous to rely on jumping, Sai told her. Being in the air leaves you vulnerable to attack. You can't dodge, and you can only move in one direction. Not to mention, if you tend to jump often, your opponents can easily predict what you're going to do and catch you in the air. Plus, if you have a frog quirk, the first thing your enemy will expect you to do is jump. That's fair. Caro. Sue croaked. All right, next student, Sai told them. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Now it was time for the class rep, Ida, to take to the battlefield. Ida was in a running stance, ready to go when Sai gave the order. All right, I'll run as fast as I can. Before she can overwhelm me, I'll kick her. Ida thought to himself, as he got ready to fight. Go, Sai ordered. Ida then proceeded to run 2 feet in front of him, before his foot fell through a portal Sai opened, causing him to trip and fall on his face. Sai then opened a bunch of portals above Ida and shot exploding swords out of them. Kaboom! Was that strictly necessary? Momo asked, wincing at what happened to Ida. Wasn't trapping him in the ground enough? Enough to win the battle, yes. Enough to keep this lesson in his memory, maybe. But just to make sure, I might as well hammer the point in. Sai explained. Speaking of the point, Ida, do you understand why you failed so quickly? Was my attack predictable? Ugh. Ida groaned as he recovered from the explosion. Very good. I could see the gears turning in your head, and yet your strategy was just run at me in a straight line really fast and kick me in the head. Sai told him bluntly. Given your quirk, that is literally the most predictable strategy you could have gone with. Remember, not all villains are idiots, and you are all going to be public figures, meaning they're going to know your quirk in advance, so they'll likely figure you out completely if you don't mix up your strategies. Lastly, watch your step. Your quirk is very reliant on the terrain you're running on, so any opponent of yours is going to want to mess with the ground in order to defeat you. I understand. I will take this lesson to heart. Thank you for imparting your wisdom on me. Ida said, getting up and bowing to her. You're welcome, Sai said, a little off-put by his appreciation despite her blowing him up. Next. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Now it was Achiko's time, and she was nervous as can be. She stood on the opposite side of the room in a battle stance, sweat rolling down her face, as she wondered how painful this was going to be. All right, let's begin. Sai signaled. Achiko wasted no time. 18%. Immediately, she dashed right at Sai, however, she didn't make the same mistake as Ida. She watched her step carefully. Sai had made a few portals in the floor to try and trip her up, but Achiko skillfully avoided them as she quickly ran at Sai. At least they're learning. Sai thought as she let Achiko approach her. Alright, I'll make it look like I'm trying to attack her from the front, then I'll circle around her and attack her from behind. Achiko's train of thought was suddenly disrupted when Sai rushed forward and kicked her to the ground. Ack! When Achiko looked back up, she saw numerous portals opened above her, with swords aimed down at her. Kaboom! Explosive swords slammed into Achiko, engulfing her in a huge blast. Remember what I said, expectations? Sai asked the class. You've already seen the disadvantages in playing into a foe's expectations, but this the advantage of setting an expectation and defying it. Well, I definitely didn't expect that. Ochako groaned. I'm willing to bet none of you would have. Sai continued. After all, I've spent all the previous battles standing completely still, and only using my quirk. I conditioned you to think only about my quirk, and so you completely overlooked the possibility of me just punching or kicking you. Which is another thing, sometimes, you don't always need to rely on your quirk. Basic punches and kicks, or even using weapons or tools in the environment, can prove effective against certain foes. Now, on to the next foe. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. And so the lesson, ass beatings, went on, with Sai utterly destroying 1A, and poking at their most damning flaws. Kaminari lacked staying power and needed to find a way to stop short-circuiting his own brain. Kirishima and Sato had an issue in that both lacked mobility. Meaning they could be easily trapped, or just kept at bay. Shoji made himself too big a target. Jiro was very reliant on her support gear. Siro was reliant on his environment. Tokoyami, aside from having little to defense against light, was left defenseless when Dark Shadow strayed too far away from him, making it harder to defend against multiple opponents or opponents that could attack from multiple angles. Todoroki's ice blocked his field of vision, giving his opponents the chance to pull something sneaky. He was also too reliant on brute-forcing his way through situations using his overwhelming power. Shinso relied too much on stealth and had little in the ways of actually fighting someone without his quirk. Mineta was too cowardly, and it left a lot of openings. Momo was very indecisive. Ojiro and Toru, funny enough, got the least amount of criticism, with Sai telling them they were doing just fine, they just lacked power, which wasn't their fault, nor could they do much to fix that situation. They could only really improve on what their areas of expertise were. And by the end of the day, Class 1A was left lying on the floor, exhausted, and covered in burns. Meanwhile, Sai was standing on the side, looking a bit winded and drinking an energy drink, all the portals she opened having made her a bit tired. Honestly, not as bad as I thought. Too strong. Mineta groaned. I can't believe she lost to that cat girl. Sai shot him a mean glare that caused Mineta to freeze. As heroes, you're going to have to find that certain heroes have types of villains they go well against, and some they do poorly against. Sometimes regardless of skill. Sai explained, sounding very, very annoyed. My quirk does poorly against foes with high mobility. And mobility is something Sori excels at. Not to mention her enhanced senses, making it easy for her to keep track of my portals. She's a powerful and surprisingly skilled fighter, with an advantage against me, so I wouldn't say her narrow victory against me was surprising. Perhaps you'd like to see an up-close demonstration of her skills? I'm sure she'd be more than happy to show you them. No. No. I'm good. Mineta shouted in fear. Yeah, we saw enough of them, we're good. Siro agreed. Please have mercy. Kaminari begged. That's what I thought, Sai smirked. I'll leave you with this, as tempting as it is to focus on coming up with new techniques and strengthening your quirks, none of that will help you if a villain exploits your weaknesses and kills you 5 seconds into the battle. Work with each other, don't avoid sparing matches against people you know you can't beat, because even if you can't win, you may learn something. With that, Sai exited, leaving the students to linger on her words. For all of 5 seconds. Hey class reps, before you sign us up for an ass-kicking, can you at least warn us first? Siro groaned. Noted, Ida replied. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 23. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.